My name is Shikha Dalmia. I'm a policy analyst with Reason Foundation, which is a think tank based out of LA in the United States. And it produces a magazine called Reason Magazine, which you should all read. It's really an awesome magazine. It does socio-political, economic commentary on all the issues of the day. There's a print version, and then there is online, which is completely free. So you should, immediately after this talk, you should all go and look it up immediately. The formal title of my speech is, What Do Shiv Sena, Brexit and Donald Trump Have in Common? And there is no real mystery to it, so I think there's no great downside of my giving the punchline away. They are all three sort of right-wing movements, nationalistic, and for my purposes, they share this idea of nativism, which is that their country is for the natives first and foremost. And I consider this all three to be somewhat unfortunate developments, and I'll get into it. But before I get into my presentation, let me tell you just a little bit about myself and my biases, or what in fashionable American lingo these days is called my priors. So my priors are that I moved to the United States about 3 decades ago in 1985. And I had a pretty typical, Desi route. Went there for graduate studies with my then husband. I got a master's in journalism. He got a master's in medical physics, which, because it was a high-skilled category, nobody cares about foreign journalists in America if they don't have green cards, because there are plenty of Americans who can read and write very well in English. And so I would never have qualified for an H-1B with those credentials. But he was a medical physicist, which was a somewhat specialized career. And he got his H-1B, and he got his, and then we both got our H-1B, and we got citizenship. So given my history, I am obviously naturally interested in immigration. And especially in America, which has this boast of being the land of immigrants, it's kind of an interesting question, at any given moment, what place immigrants have in American society. And so when I joined in 1995, the editorial board of the Detroit News, which actually happened to be sort of a free market conservative newspaper in Michigan, the biggest newspaper in Michigan, immigration became one of my core beats. And I've been writing about immigration now for 25 years. And because of that, and also partly because I am what is called a libertarian, a political libertarian. Does the term mean anything to you guys here? Does the term libertarian mean anything? Okay, what does it mean to you?
The term libertarian means basically essentially free market.
Yeah.
And an extreme view of the free market paradigm where the state is looked at only as a watchdog
Yeah.
state and not intervening in any other aspect of economic or social life.
Right, that's, very well put, So basically, libertarians are people who believe in a limited government state, and we don't believe that the state has a role either in the bedroom or in the boardroom. We want the state to leave individuals alone in all dimensions of life. We want people to be free from government intervention. And and that's like the first starting point of my being, what is these days in America called pejoratively open borders, which means I believe in an open door immigration policy with unfettered mobility rights for individuals. But just to be clear about what this term means, the open border movement has actually grown quite a bit in the last 25 years in the United States. The term, was basically unknown when I started writing about it, except for in like small secret cabals, which you had to have a membership code to get into them. And since then, it has actually come out in the open, and it's discussed openly. A lot of time pejoratively, but also I think open borders actually has a great deal of moral resonance in America. At the same time as its moral resonance has grown, so has the backlash to open borders, of course, but just immigration in general. But now what I mean by an open border or an open door policy is what I prefer to open borders. It does not mean that a country should welcome anybody, any hoodlum or any terrorist or any contagious person into the country without asking any questions. So I'm not saying that India should allow ISI agents here, or America and the West should simply allow ISIS jihadis to do, to cause havoc. That's not the position. What it does mean is that the immigration policy of any country should be based on the socioeconomic needs of the country's residents, not the arbitrary whims of bureaucrats who have some grand social designs for what immigrants should do or not do in the country. So this implies that the government has a legitimate role in keeping out foreigners who pose a security threat, occasionally a very contagious health threat, what have you. But beyond that, basically, we should have unfettered mobility rights. I don't think the government should be in the business, for example, of preventing private employers, such as Microsoft or Apple, from hiring willing Indian or Chinese programmers, or California's peach farmers from hiring Mexican workers. That ought to be their business. The government can do a background check, a security check, and a health check, but other than that, there should be a presumption for liberty built into the country's immigration policies. Now, that actually emphatically is not how the immigration system works anywhere currently, although that has been America's, pretty much was America's policy right until about 1920, when America actually essentially had open borders, where people could just show up to Ellis Island from anywhere in the world, and they would be ushered in, they would fill out some papers, show, they would carry some kind of a background check from their own countries, which would be presented to the authorities there, and they would be given visas, work visas, and permanent visas right on the spot, and that would be it. That essentially is how the system worked in America till about 1930, and then they kind of slammed on that kind of an arrangement. Now, essentially what all countries, and even America, the so-called land of immigrants, has, the way I like to put it is, they have a blanket ban on immigration, but they will relax that ban selectively, based on some arbitrary bureaucratic categories that the government decides are important at that given moment. So, they'll have a quota for high-skilled immigrants, they'll have some quota for low-skilled immigrants, they'll have some quota for diversity, they'll have some quota for family reunification. But they are essentially like little windows in this wall, basically against immigrants. So given such priors, given what my philosophy and my view is, imagine how horrified I was when Bal Thackeray's Shiv Sena launched its Sons of Soil movement in the early 1990s. I mean, this was actually just 6 or 7 years after I had left this country. And, Bal Thackeray was not, even a glimmer in anybody's eye at that time. And suddenly, I started hearing reports about the Sons of Soil, the movement. And what was peculiar about this movement was that it was not against foreign immigrants from other countries, but internal migrants from other states. Suketu Mehta, how many of you have heard of him? Yeah, so he's written this, huh? Yes, exactly. He's the author of this excellent novel, Maximum City, about Mumbai. And he actually had an op-ed in the New York Times just last week that laid out some of the parallels between Trump and Bal Thackeray. And what he pointed out was that Bal Thackeray launched his movement as a very pivotal time in Mumbai's history, when it was transitioning from an industrial and a manufacturing base to largely a financial and services base, which is kind of what's happening, largely happening in the United States right now. At that time, there was a great deal of anxiety among Maharashtrians who were feeling sort of excluded from, the Bombay boom of the 90s. They resented both the moneyed cosmopolitan elites as well as the North Indian immigrants who competed with them for low-skilled jobs, all of which has echoes in the United States and, and Europe right now. Now, Thackeray promised to restore Maharashtrian jobs by threatening mob violence against industrialists who hired non-natives. He imposed a linguistic test on state residents, declaring war on non-Marathi speakers, starting with Keralites. He went after, people from Kerala. Then the vada eaters of Tamil Nadu, they were, in his cross eyes, followed by Biharis and then Gujaratis. The irony is that Thackeray himself was the son of a man who was an economic migrant who had hopscotched around India, in search of a better life. His father, Keshwan Sitaram Thackeray, who actually encouraged him to form Shiv Sena, hailed from a place near Nasik. He went to Kolkata for his studies, after which he moved to Karnataka and Madhya Pradesh before he came back to Mumbai, all in search of a better livelihood, exactly like the kind of people that his son then eventually wanted to throw out of Bombay. So, how's that for irony? But as I watched Shiv Sena in horror in the 1990s chanting Maharashtra for Maharashtrians and other similar slogans, I used to console myself and saying this could never happen in the West, right? I mean, this is America, how could this ever happen here? And in a way, it hasn't happened in America. I mean, in the sense that there isn't any, antipathy towards, towards their own citizens, internal migrants. So, people from Arizona can move to California or to Michigan or what have you. Nobody wants to come to Michigan because it's too cold, but they could. So there isn't, that level of craziness in America, for sure.